Welcome to St. James the Greater School for today's episode of HEC TV Live. Hi everybody, I'm Tim Gore, your host for HEC TV Live, and I'm very happy that you're here for our exciting program and interactive authors workshop with Ridley Pearson. Though we're at St. James the Greater today in the heart of St. Louis, the students who are actually joining us are from St. Joan of Arc. St. Joan of Arc, give yourselves a nice big hand. You probably don't want to listen to me talk all that much more, do you? No, I say we listen to the fantastic author, Mr. Ridley Pearson. Let's bring him on.
Thank you. I was having lunch earlier and someone came in and said, Joan of Arc's here, and I went, wow! Now I realize what it was. I expected clanking armor and, you know, all of that. When I was 18, which wasn't too recently, I had this great chance to go with a friend, an American friend whose family lived in Thailand, clear halfway around the world. And his dad was over there building, was an American over there building airports. And so they'd lived there for a long time, and he spoke fluent Thai, even though he was 17, 18 years old. And it was a wild city. Bangkok was a totally crazy city for a couple of 18-year-old kids. And they had, you know, like 5 servants and a chauffeur. It was like, you know, being a prince in a castle somewhere. And a ways into the stay, the mom decided that we should see other parts of Thailand. And rather than fly, she thought it would be fun if we went by train. So at that time, there were no diesel trains in Thailand. It was still wood steam engine, you know, wood-burning steam engine trains, which you hadn't seen in the U.S. for 100 years. And with a cow catcher out front, you know, the whole thing. And so we get on this train. It's a 2-day trip. The first day is through rice paddies, just so beautiful. You know, as flat as a pancake and all water and green and people out there working the fields and just incredible. And we spent the night in this town. They actually park your train on a side track for the night, and got up the next morning and we came down to our train, and it was just surrounded by soldiers. Any of you guys like 14 years old? Yeah, so it was 14-year-olds in khaki uniforms with Uzis guarding our train. It was a little intimidating. And there were a couple hundred of them, and these young men, and they had added a car to our train, right behind the car that held the wood for the steam locomotive, and that's where all the soldiers were clustered around. And the people on the train, a rumor went around that it was probably either guns or gold because it was being so carefully protected. And when the train went to leave, about 50 of those soldiers stayed on our train. True story. And the second day, we get out, and you know, those old trains, they had this rhythm going where it was like, you know, so we're out there cruising along hour after hour, blazing heat. It had to be 105 degrees, 90% humidity. It was like St. Louis in the summer, which I didn't know at the time, but it was really hot. And we were in the foothills of the Himalayas, and we started to climb and climb and climb. And you remember from your childhood the story of the little train that could? Well, it turned out I was on the little train that couldn't. We got going, and we'd been going several hours, and that rhythm that you get kind of in your bones by that point changed from, you know, to sort of and we're all looking out the window, and we're on these steep inclines and going higher and higher, and it goes and it stops, and we're on this mountain pass like this, and the train can't, you know, goes wing, wing. It's trying to go, and its wheels won't take it up and over, so it backs up, and it goes like 20 minutes back, far back down to where it's flat, gets up this huge head of steam, and it stops again. And we're in about the same spot. This thing just can't get over the mountain. At which point we realized whatever was in that car that they'd loaded on was really heavy because it wasn't letting our train get over the mountain. And the soldiers, whose job it is to protect that car, come through the other cars and tell all the men to get off the train. And we went, excuse me, but we bought tickets. They said, you get off the train. So about 200 of us get off the train in this blazing heat. And I'm thinking they're all going to take out their guns and just mow us down, lighten the load a little, and drive on over the mountain. And once we get out, the train backs away again and leaves us, like 150, 200 of us out, standing out in the jungle. No longer is it rice paddies. It's like dark, wickedly hot, mottled sunlight, blazing hot day. And they tell us to break up rocks and put friction on the tracks in order to get the train up and over. They wanted to build some traction into this thing. So we spread out maybe 3/4 of a mile up this mountain. And we're out there busting rocks up and putting sand on the tracks. And finally, the little plume of steam shows up again. We're all going, whoa, at least we're not going to get murdered out here. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we hear the and it hits the first part of our sanded area, and it's sounding better. It's looking pretty good. And then it starts to slow down again, and it's just about to stop when the guys with the guns say, push train over mountain. And we all grab onto this thing and walk it up and over the summit of this mountain. That is what writing a novel is like. I get up in the morning, everything looks all sunny and lovely, and by the end of the day, my assistants and I are trying to push and walk this story up and over the mountain so it'll make some kind of sense, because inevitably, these things give you a hard time. So today, we're going to just bomb through some quizzes and tests that are only going to count 70% of your language arts score for the rest of the year. For me, the process of writing really comes down to observing, reporting, and editing, which is like imagining a story, writing the story, and revising the story. And a huge part of it for me is that early stage of observation. I'm a big researcher. I like to know what I'm talking about. In order to quiz you guys on how good you are at seeing things that aren't there, we're going to do some weird stuff. Because my job as a writer is to see what isn't there. You know, you look at a painting and you see a frog, and I look at the painting and see a unicorn. That kind of thing. Because a writer's job is to take you into a more interesting and different place than everyday life. I mean, I get up, I write, I go to sleep. You guys get up, you go to school, you go to sleep. It's got to be more interesting than that. So I'm going to put an image on the screen. And when I do, it's going to be on there very briefly. You guys want to run your eyes along that image and see as many items as you can, and then when the image goes off the screen, write down what you saw. If you try to write it while you're going, you're only going to get a couple done. The object is to get as many of these as you can. And it's not going to be up there long. It's going to be up there for like the count of 5. So here we go. Watch your screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's off. Write down anything you can remember seeing. I could start telling you things you didn't see, and that would be really mean, because I would put images in your head, because words put images in our heads, which is my job. Hopefully you have more than one down. Good. Anybody know how many there were total? How many?
16.
There were 16. So you want as many as you can get down about that. Okay, is everybody done? Somebody name something they saw.
A tree.
A tree would be correct. That's one. Now don't write now.
A puzzle piece.
A what?
A puzzle
Puzzle
piece.
piece is absolutely one.
Person.
A person is one. Person walking.
A paper clip.
A paper clip.
The color blue.
You are a devil. Okay, security. We found him. We found the card. And I co-write a bunch of books with a guy named Dave Barry. We've written a series of books called Peter and the Starcatchers. And Dave is a very funny guy. And he goes out and observes things. And talk about seeing what none of us see. He can see the funny in anything. He can see, like, the most boring thing on earth, and then he can write about it, and it cracks you up. And when he was in school, his teachers used to say, get serious, young man. You can't laugh your way through life. Well, Dave has done a very good job of laughing his way through life. How many of you, I'm now going to list, so check off which ones you actually got. Are you with us, St. Elizabeth?
St. Elizabeth, come on in and say hello to everybody. Yo! Whoa, we hear you.
Hey,
just
give me
fine.
one, St. Elizabeth, give me one of the images that wasn't mentioned so far.
Lightning bolt.
Lightning bolt is correct. Okay, so here they all are. Check them off if you got them right, but don't add any to it. A tree, a puzzle piece, a walking guy, a paper clip, a clock, a bird, an umbrella, little waves, which could be a weird mustache or the ocean or water, a light bulb, a phone, a car, a push pin, a key, an envelope, a lightning bolt, and a bike. How many here in this room, Joan of Arc, got more than 5? Wow. How many got more than 6? More than 7? How many got more than 10? How about over in, can we bring in Washington?
Washington Middle School? How many of your group got 10 or more?
Hey, hello. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello!
Did anybody get over 10?
Did anyone get more than 10?
Anybody get more than 10 in their visuals?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's nice. So those are the skills you use. You have to see something and quickly grab what's there because it passes by. I overheard this conversation in a bar one time, and it was the most amazing thing, and only at the end of it did I realize they were talking about a dog. I thought they were talking about a woman. And so you got to be quick and grab all your stuff because all of a sudden your world shifts and you go, whoops, I was totally wrong. So we're going to keep checking your ability to see things, memorize them, figure it out. I'm going to put very briefly onto the screen some arrows. You need to know which box the arrows were in and which direction they're pointing. Which box they're in, which direction they're pointing. And here they come. And they're gone. Figure it out in your head which box they were in, which way they were pointing. Make yourself notes if you need clues. And here's your group to pick from. Is it A, B, C, or D? How many here in this room, St. Joan of Arcians, think it was A? 3 or 4? How about in Washington? How many for A?
Washington Middle School, how many of you think it's box A? Oh, you're telling me what you think it is instead. Hold that thought, Washington.
Oh, that's all right. Okay. How about in St. Elizabeth?
St. Elizabeth?
We got any A takers?
Any A takers? Oh, you're giving me another option.
How many think it's B in here? How many think it's C in here? How many think it's D in here? And the answer is C. We heard a big C come from St. Elizabeth, so way to go, St. Elizabeth. The whole deal is, as a writer, like working with Dave Barry, where Dave can see the silly in things, I tend to see the suspense in something. So I can see a crime in about anything. And I do a lot of writing for adults in that area, suspense and crime. So again, my job is to look at what looks like an everyday thing. And like when I was a 10-year-old, I had figured out how to rob the bank in the town that I lived. My mother thought I was a psycho, I'm sure. It's like I'm sitting in the back seat going, hey, you could rob the bank. What? What are you thinking about that stuff? So do you see a word in this image? And what is that word?
Illusion.
Illusion. That's correct. Anybody see a different confounding word?
Optical.
Optical illusion. Optical in yellow, illusion in color. Do you see that? A word within a word. Can you see the gray circles between the black squares? Okay, they aren't there. Your optic nerve draws circles between the corners of the squares. If you move your eyes slowly around that image, the circles disappear and reappear. My job as a writer is to see those gray circles, to see what you don't see. What are the two forces in any story, whether it's Percy Jackson or Harry Potter or my series The Kingdom Keepers or Peter and the Starcatchers, that work against each other? It's almost in every story, sometimes in different degrees. What are those two pieces that work against each other?
Good and evil.
Good and evil. And they have to coexist within each other. Can you see both good and evil? Another test. This only counts 80% of your grade. Are you ready? What is the animal you see? A frog. But here we go. It is actually a horse. Same image, two different animals. See the eye, the nose, the mouth, the mane. So my job is to not only see the frog, but also see the horse. And then write the story probably more about the horse than the frog. Because I want to write the story about the thing you're not totally aware of. What are the three pieces structurally in a story, in a piece of fiction? Anybody? How about over in St. Elizabeth? What are the three pieces in a story?
Beginning, middle, and end.
Thank you. Beginning, middle, and end. Yay, St. Elizabeth! Beginning, middle, and end. And one of the things that people make mistakes with when they write a fiction piece is they just start writing. You know, they see this car with smoke coming out of it. They go, I'm going to write a story about that. But they don't think it through to what comes in the middle, and most of all, how does it end? You need to figure out the ending. You don't need every single piece of detail, but you have to be, you know, if you got in a car with a full tank of gas and you had nowhere to go, you'd have a great time driving around, and then you'd run out of gas. If you have someplace to go, grandma's house, the store, a Lady Gaga concert, then you have purpose, and you have your gas, and you get in the car and you go somewhere. And when you write a story, you want to know that you want to get to that concert at some point. You don't want to just bomb around, because it gets uninteresting to the rest of us sitting in the back seat saying, what's the purpose of this drive? So there are three pieces, a beginning, middle, and end, and you want to think these through. I write them down. I outline my work. So I do huge, you know, sometimes 15, 16, 30 pages of exactly what's going to go on in the story. You don't have to do that. I like doing that because I can always go back to it. My story may go somewhere else, which is fine, but if I get totally lost, then I can come back to it. So at the beginning of the story, generally, we try to meet who's in the story. We have a setting of the story. We have an inciting moment, something that kicks our story off and gets it going. We have what's at stake, what's in that conflict, what's in that experience. And out of that is usually some kind of rub, like Harry will have in Harry Potter, will have some kind of brush with evil by the end of the beginning. After that, we go to the middle. And in the middle, a story complicates. In a romantic comedy, things get more difficult. They go to a dance, they go to a party, they think they like each other, they try to kiss, it doesn't work out. They're starting to really fall apart here, nothing's going to happen. And by the end of the middle, everything goes bad. And if you watch a movie from now on, you will see that about an hour and a quarter into that movie, there will be this really disastrous moment. The guy has lost his job, his car has broken down, he's late to his own wedding, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, and then it will fade to black, and it'll come up again, and we're in the end of the story. And in the end of the story, you get rid of the subplots, you resolve the ideas, and you come to the huge resolution of the whole story. What's important here, and we talked about this a little earlier, is that when you reach that point, the important thing is that somebody learns something or takes something away. You can't have a story that just goes nowhere and has no reward. We've all gone to movies and read books where you get to the end and you go, you know, it was okay, I mean, it was exciting and all of that, but I don't know. And that's usually that no one wins something or loses something. It may be something as simple as a phobia being overcome. They're afraid of small spaces at the beginning of the story. To win at the end, they've got to be in this little tunnel and crawl out, but they've overcome that. That's a takeaway that counts. It may be that they got the girl. Comedy is the one place, humor is the one place you're allowed to violate that. Years ago, there was a movie called Groundhog's Day, where this guy woke up, it was kind of like Freaky Friday thing, but Groundhog's Day, the guy would wake up and it would be the same day. He was just reliving the same day over and over. And you can end that with the alarm going off and him starting the day again, because it's funny. But generally, you need a takeaway by the end of your story. So once I've got an outline, whether it's written down or in my head, I've got a beginning, I've got a middle, I've got an end, I get writing. And writing involves me taking words and trying to put an image into your head. That's really what I'm after. And I do that usually through research, whether I'm on the internet Googling stuff or whether I get the chance to actually have an experience. So when Disney came to me and knew me as a suspense writer, they came to me and said, would you be able to write a suspense novel set inside our Disney parks, but really aimed at maybe a slightly younger audience? And I said, well, I could do that, but you would have to give me full access to your theme parks, because that's the way I work. I do research. And they said, dude, we are not giving you full access to our theme parks. And I said, well, then I can't write the book for you. And about a month later, my phone rang, and it was the editor at Disney, and she said, okay, you have full access to our theme parks. So I carry a VIP card that lets me into any Disney park around the world anytime I want to go in for free, and my whole family gets to go with me. And if I call ahead, they will have an Imagineer, a person who designs the attractions, waiting for me when the park is closed. So 20 times I've been into the Magic Kingdom in Disney World. Anybody ever been to any Disney park? Well, anybody in the Florida parks in Disney World? Well, I've gone down there many, many times now. When it's dark out, the rides are shut down, the place is shut down. This is a place that can hold 60 to 80,000 people, and there are 2 of us in there. It is the creepiest place on earth. Everything looks so nice, but there's no sweet music coming, there's no lights. It's just weird. It's like a giant ghost town. And I've got to go into places like Small World. And Small World is a ride where there's like 2,000 dolls, and they all spin around and dance, and they're dressed up in the outfits of the country of their origin, and they sing this obnoxious song over and over and over until you want to shoot the speakers out. They go, eat them all out after all. They go on, and they're spinning around and doing their dance. Well, when I went there, it was 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. The ride was shut down, so the dolls were all like stuck in their positions. It was, you know, these sweet little dolls, but they weren't so sweet when I was there. And it was dark, and there was no sound, no movement, no nothing, and it looked kind of like this. It looked really bizarre. And we're going through, and all these dolls are stuck in their little motions. And we went 1 scene, 2 scenes, 3 scenes, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw 2 of the dolls step forward. And I jumped, literally, like 5 feet out of the boat. And I landed next to my guide, and he said, "What's wrong with you?" And I went, "Did you see And he said, I said, 2 of the dolls just moved. Did you not see that? And he said, Ridley, the ride is shut down. There is no way the dolls moved. And I said, dude, 2 of those dolls just stepped forward while I was watching. Since then, I have had a radio interviewer who saw the same thing I saw. He saw 4 dolls move. So I go home, and I'm writing a piece about 5 kids inside Small World, and they're being chased by the Disney villains, the overtakers, the people who want to take over the parks that the kids are trying to stop from allowing this to happen. And the kids are in there. The ride is shut down. There's no sound. There's no lights. There's no nothing. And 2 of the dolls move. Then 4 of the dolls move. And then all of the dolls break off the platform, and they're marching like these Chucky dolls, and they dive in and they start biting at the kids. And that's my version and vision of what it's like to be in Small World, but it's based on my own freaked out experience because I saw those dolls move. If I just sat up in my office in St. Louis and tried to write something interesting, I wouldn't have had that idea. It was from observation. I went on to Splash Mountain, and in Splash Mountain, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, as most attractions in Disney World do. It has a beginning where you're led into this weird, creepy world. There's a middle part where you end up in the Brer Rabbit area. You're in these log boats. And then the final bit, you go down this chute that takes you down a water chute at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and it scares the daylights out of me. I was being shown around Splash Mountain by this old white-haired dude, and he knew everything about Disney World. He had worked there 30 years. He had met Walt Disney years ago. He was very cool to talk to. And I had already written a sort of an older guy into my story. And I said, hey, could I change the name of the guy in my story to your name? And he went, oh man, I'd be honored. So in the Kingdom Keepers series, there's this old white-haired guy named Wayne, but he really exists. And if you go onto the Splash Mountain ride and go to get into one of these boats, the guy putting you in there is this old white-haired guy, and he wears his name thing, and it says Wayne. And kids write me all the time on email and say, I met Wayne, I met the real Wayne, because they'll see his thing and go, are you Wayne from Kingdom Keepers? And he goes, heck yes, and takes out a Sharpie and signs their maps and stuff. They also let me into the Utilidor. When they built the Magic Kingdom, they had to raise it 25 feet because it was swamp. So they decided they would build tunnels in there. They have tunnels as wide as this room and about 1.5 miles of them underneath the Magic Kingdom. The characters go through there, all the cotton candy and hamburgers, all of that stuff goes on underneath the Magic Kingdom. So I'm under there, and we're walking along, and there's this giant pipe. It's like 4.5 feet wide, tucked up in the right-hand corner of this huge tunnel. All these golf carts are going by carrying everything. It was very, very interesting. And I asked about this 4-foot pipe. I said, that's like the biggest pipe I've ever seen. What is in that? And he said, Ridley, have you ever seen people carrying trash out of the Magic Kingdom? And I said, no. And he said, that's because we don't carry our trash out, we suck it out. They have a system. Up on the ground level are these trash chutes, like this image. They drop the trash bags, these big, heavy, like we've all got in our kitchen, trash bags into the trash chute, and it goes, and it gets sucked down in there, and it gets sucked out by the power of air and thrown into this giant trash compactor. Well, I'm up there observing, and I'm thinking, trash bag, kid. Trash bag, kid. A trash bag is about the same size and weight as one of you guys in a cannonball. So by the end of the first Kingdom Keepers, the kids are doing cannonballs into the trash chute and getting sucked out of the park. Not advised because it would kill you, but in my book, it doesn't. I also got to go to the Animal Kingdom, including a $100 million roller coaster called Expedition Everest. I got to go in there when it was shut down. It took us about 2 hours to walk it. I took all these crazy notes, and then at the end of it, the guy walking me around said, okay, it's your turn to ride it. We're going to turn this thing on and let you ride it. And I said, well, it's very kind of you, but I don't do roller coasters. I said, I can't even do the chute on Splash Mountain. And he said, dude, I got up at 4:30 in the morning. You're doing my roller coaster. So I get on this thing alone, and they turn it on, and I get going 8 billion miles an hour. And all of a sudden, I look ahead of me, and what do I see but a broken track? And I'm just going, no! And it skids to a stop. And then behind you, what you don't know is the track switches, like an old train track. And you back up through the dark at 40 miles an hour. If you want a spooky feeling, go backwards in the dark at 40 miles an hour, and this giant Yeti comes out of the dark and rah! And about tears your head off. At that point, I needed to change my underwear. And I got off of this thing, which has a triple loop at the end of it, and I was walking around the park to do my research. I'm sure they all thought I was drunk, but I don't drink, so that wasn't the case. I also got to go to the bat enclosure, and the bat enclosure has 1.5 foot, this big fruit bats from South America. These things look so cute when you see them close up, but then they turn to face you, and they aren't nearly as cute. And the Kingdom Keepers, once I got back and I was writing about this, I put the Kingdom Keepers into the bat enclosure with all these bad boys flying around trying to scratch their faces while they're trying to climb this rock wall and get out of there. I also got to do Epcot with the huge ball. I don't know if you know Epcot. I love Epcot. And there's this sort of little-known thing that if you call ahead, you and your family can book a Segway tour where before the park opens, you bomb around the park on Segways. Well, when I was in there, I went to Test Track, which I really loved. And in the waiting line of Test Track, I saw all these crash test dummies. They had all these crash test dummies sitting around. And I thought, wait, if I can make the Small World dolls come alive, I can make the Test Track crash dummies come alive. So in the third Kingdom Keepers, the crash test dummies are riding Segways, chasing the kids all over the park and trying to kill them. The fourth one, I got to go to Disney Hollywood Studios, do the same kind of thing, several trips down there, research when it was closed, and then I got a really neat invitation. The Disney cruise ship line invited me to write a book set on the cruise line. So my family has gotten 4 free cruises from the Disney Cruise Line on these massive, huge ships. And I've gotten to go into places on the ships that even the crew has not gone. I went into the engine room, which is the entire length of this 1,000-foot ship. The drive shaft alone for this thing that spins this single propeller is about 60 yards wide, and it's about this fat around. It is an electric boat, so it burns fuel oil to generate electricity, and then it runs off the electricity. So this thing has 3 generators on it that run off of fuel oil in case one breaks. They have 3 of them. Each one of those can power a village of 20,000 homes. So if you had all of them running at the same time, a single Disney cruise ship could power a city of 60,000 homes. I got to go into the ship's hospital. I got to go up with the captain into the pilot's area where they steer and run the ship. I just had the most amazing time. The 6th book comes out in April. It's the second half of the cruise line. This time they're on zip lines in Costa Rica and doing all this crazy stuff. Just the most amazing time. But my writing job is taking all this stuff I see and find and write down in my little notebook and bringing it to life so that you see it in your head. And to do that, I have to have the skills of description. If I spend 9 pages trying to describe to you what the Small World dolls look like, you're going to throw the thing across the room. I've got to, in a paragraph or so, I've got to be able to put an image in your head and have it lock in there and have you be right there with me. So these skills of description come into play. And I believe most, if not all of you, including those of you in St. Elizabeth and Washington, took my little writer's workshop where you had to look at an image of 4 different people. There was Taylor Lautner, Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, and Orlando Bloom, and you had to describe them. And you had to do it in 4 or 5 sentences without mentioning their names, without mentioning their clothing, without mentioning jewelry and be descriptive enough that I would know who it was you were writing about. Did you guys do this? So you know what I'm talking about. So now I'm going to embarrass everyone out there because I'm going to read what some of you did. What I want you to do is, especially here, Joan of Arcians, raise your hand when you know who it is. Okay, so if I say 2 ears and a nose, which one kid once wrote for one of his description, I said, you know, a lot of people have 2 ears and a nose. It's going to have to be a little more detailed than that. So when you know who it is, the moment you know who it is, raise your hand. And we'll see the power of description. Sometimes it's in the first few words. Sometimes we have to go a sentence or two. He has dark brown hair that is ruffled on the top. He has thick eyebrows low on his head. Anybody know? 2 people know. He has a dimple the size of a pea in the middle of his chin. Oh, come on. You don't know who it is yet. His eyes are dark brown with a little sparkle on the left side. He has a stern face. Who is it? Anybody? Everybody? Who is it? Speak.
Orlando Bloom.
Taylor Lautner. But see, someone said Orlando Bloom because he has curly dark hair, dark eyes. He's got a little soul patch or something where you can't quite see the dimple, but maybe that wasn't quite enough detail. It was fun writing. That was done by Ciara in Elkhart Lake, maybe Wisconsin. It says MS, but that wouldn't be. But welcome, Elkhart Lake. It might have been Minnesota, it might have been Michigan. Okay, raise your hand when you know who it is. This person looks like he just climbed out of a clothes dryer that was put on full speed. That's great writing. His sloppy hair is twisted and deformed every which way. Most everybody has their hands up here. I hope you do in St. Elizabeth and elsewhere. His expression looks serious and depressed, like he just broke up with his true love. His hair, yet again, looking like a curling iron, went on steroids and attacked him. It's a deep, rich tone of black. His eyebrows are furrowed with consternation. That is such a fun piece of writing. That's by Jack at Northeast Middle School, and that one is in Michigan. Okay, again, raise your hand when you know. His hair is messy and unbrushed as if he just has awoken from sleep. Okay, we don't know for sure. His eyes are brown and squinted, very serious. His mouth open but not quite in a smile, more like disappointed. Who do we have? Taylor Lautner. But some thought Orlando Bloom. Detail in your writing is critical. You want to get to those moments, those pieces of description that set an image in our head so we know exactly what we're looking at. That was a fun one by Katie from Dallas, Texas. Okay, here's another one. Raise your hand when you know. Her hair looks silky soft and made of golden honey-colored curls. Every hand should be up because it is Taylor Swift. Her brow line is asking a question. No, her brow line is slightly raised as if she's asking a question. Her soft blue eyes are pools of liquid sapphire, sparkling with something. Her face is as delicate as a fragile china doll. Great stuff from Alexandra in Baldwin, Missouri. Hey, that's close to home. Okay, raise your hand when you know. With his tousled hair, he looks as if he just got off the beach. His eyes stare at you with a quizzical expression. He shows close to no emotion. Not even a smirk. Anybody know? His hair looks like he doesn't even care now he looks, how he looks. This man looks as if he has a kind of gentle soul. Who is it? Orlando Bloom. That's written by Maggie of St. Joan of Arc. All right, Maggie. One last one. Remember, the moment you know, her white hair is fancied and shaped like a Barbie's hair. Everybody's hand here at St. Joan of Arc is happening because it's Lady Gaga. Her mood is almost as crazy as a lion's. That's fun. She looks like she has thrown a mask of makeup on herself to cover up her true personality. Whoa, I love that. That's by Charlie St. Joan of Arc. Way to go, Charles. So, hopefully, you see the point that in description, you can't dilly-dally. You've got to get to the points that give us more than 2 eyes and a nose, more than brown curly hair. Sometimes you might want to have said, he has a mustache. Boom. Lady Gaga's was shaved off years ago. So that is only Orlando Bloom. It might have been dyed, but it doesn't look like it's there. Poor Lady Gaga in the last session got more comments about her nose. One comment was that it looked as round as a caterpillar, and the other was that it was as long as Pinocchio. And I was apologizing left and right since we know she's watching this. And she's coming to St. Louis, and we don't want to really disappoint her. The bigger point I want to get to, and this is something that can help you all the way through high school and college, is that whether you're writing nonfiction, whether you're writing a book report, whether you're writing something for history or fiction as I write, it isn't about writing it. It's about rewriting and revising it. When you write a paper for class and you write it the night before and turn it in, you're going to be lucky if you get a C or a C+, a B-. If you do that same thing a day early and put it aside for an hour or two and reread it like your teacher's going to read it, not like you wrote it, but objectively, like you have never seen this before, you will find ways to shorten your sentences, change your verbs, rearrange your ideas. I do this over and over. Dave Barry and I, with whom I write Peter and the Starcatchers, Dave Barry and I rewrite our work 6 to 8 times, every single chapter. One chapter was rewritten 11 times. I just had a thriller come out called The Risk Agent last June, my biggest selling suspense novel ever. I rewrote that book 9 times. This is my 42nd book I wrote, and I rewrote it 9 full times. I wrote like 6,000 pages to get a 500-page book published. But it got better and better and better each and every time. So here is a page that was a first draft that Dave Barry and I wrote. This is from Peter and the Starcatcher. You don't have to be able to read the letters. I just want you to see how much of it is white, okay, because that's the first draft. Dave would send it to me and I would rewrite it. I would send it back to him, he would rewrite it. He would send it back to me, I would rewrite it. I would send it back to him, he would rewrite it. Finally, we got done, and through the magic of computers, about a year later, I was able to compare the published page with this first page that we had written. And this is what the published page ended up looking like. In blue is what we added, and in red is what we took out. And you can see there's very little white left on the page. Most of what we wrote had been thrown out by the time it was published. It had been changed in one way or another. That's your job, is to rewrite yourself. Have your mom look at it. Have your brother look at it. Have somebody make comments on it and fix it. Writing really isn't done the first time. It's done the 3rd time, the 5th time, the 8th time. That's when it gets good. If you're taking a big test like an SAT, see if you can't do the essay part first, then do the math, and then go back and rewrite your essay a little bit. You'll get a higher score. That's what I do. That's what I spend 6 to 8 to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week doing. I absolutely love what I do because I tell these wacko stories, whether it's some agent overseas killing somebody or Maleficent chasing these 5 kids across Disney World. I hope you have as much fun writing as I do, and I think we have time for questions now.
Thank you very much, Ridley.
Yeah, I don't hear them clapping in Washington.
Washington, and make
Come
sure
on
Washington
now,
Middle School and
give it up.
St. Elizabeth, we want to
Just
make
kidding.
sure you're clapping as well.
We're going to do questions.
We're going to do questions. These questions have been sent to us in advance. A couple of them come from one of our interactive schools at Washington Middle School and some from other places around the country. And we're going to start by going to Garrett at Washington Middle School. Garrett, come on in and let us hear your question.
Say, here's Karen.
This is Garrett from Washington, and he's got a question for you, Mr. Pearson.
When did you get started writing and why did you start?
When did I get started writing and why did I start? The why is when I was a kid, we had TV, but TV was the screen was about the size of an iPad, and it was black and white and fuzzy, and I lived near New York, so we got about 5 channels. TV really wasn't much of an option when I was growing up, so I played with Army men, and I loved Army men. I would spend hours on the floor of my room mocking up wars. That's probably why I kill people in my books now. You know, I would literally make parachutes out of napkins and drop them from our 2nd story so that my Army men could parachute down to the 1st floor. My sister played with dolls, I played with Army men, and I made up stories in my head. I've always been a storyteller. When I was 10 years old, I taught myself how to touch type from a book that my sister had. But I had nothing to type. I realized it was a futile cause because I had nothing to type. And I started making up stories really more as a way to practice my typing than anything else. And I bet I wrote 100 stories just to practice my typing. Then high school, college, all of that took up my time. And when I got out, I wanted to be a musician, and I wrote songs. And that got to be a very claustrophobic world, trying to tell a story in just a few lines of poetry. So I started writing bigger and bigger things. I wrote for 8.5 years and finally got published. So it was a really long road.
Thanks, Ridley. Thanks for the question, Garrett. Alex is going to come up to the microphone and ask a question for one of our web viewers. Thanks, Alex.
Hi, my name is Alex. I am an 8th grader at St. Joan of Arc School, and I'm asking this question for Kevin M. from St. Paul's Lutheran School in Orange, California. Do you have a special routine when you write a book?
Do I have a special routine when I write a book? Sometimes I do handstands and no. Yeah, I create 3 pieces of my book. What are those 3 pieces? I create a beginning, a middle, and an end. I usually do it on paper. A lot of people just do it in their heads. And I go out and what do I do? But what do I do when I'm out in places like Disney World and stuff? Yeah, I research, I observe, I take notes on all of that, and then I finally write it. I work from about 7:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon when my kids come home from school. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Katie.
Hi, Katie.
I'm a 7th grader, and I'm asking this question for students from East Middle School in Raymore, Missouri. Where do you get your ideas and your inspirations for your books?
Where do I get my ideas and inspiration? Well, this time of year, I try to get my ideas at Kmart because they're cheaper. No, just kidding. One of, observation, which I've talked about, is a big source of my inspiration. But you also have to keep your ears open. I was reading Peter Pan to my then 5-year-old daughter. She's 15 now. And she covered up the book about 5 pages in and said, "Dad, how did Peter Pan meet Captain Hook in the first place?" We were reading Peter Pan. And I went, whoa, how come that kid can fly? Why does he never grow old? What's with detaching from shadows? There were all these questions that had never been answered. And I thought, there's a story in that. And then I thought, no, there's a book in that. And I asked my friend Dave Barry, this Pulitzer Prize-winning humor writer, if he would help me write a series of books about how a boy became Peter Pan. And that became Peter and the Starcatchers, which is now a play on Broadway, this hugely successful play on Broadway, and is now being made into a film by Disney, and it's going to be directed by Gary Ross, the director of Hunger Games. So this one simple idea from my daughter's mouth of, "Dad, how did Peter Pan meet Captain Hook in the first place?" has created this whole industry of Peter and the Starcatchers. So you just never know where the next good idea is going to come from.
Hi, I'm Charlie.
Hey, Charlie.
I'm an 8th grade student from St.
I'm a
Joan
10th
of Arc.
grade student.
I'm asking a question for Ashley and Renee from Northeast Middle School in Midland, Michigan.
Charlie is a very generous guy. Thank you, Charlie.
How did you get the inspiration for Kingdom Keepers?
How did I get, well, that's a fun one. My first time I went to Disney World, I was much older than you guys, and I was with my family. And at the end of the night, they have you all leave the park. So there were like 60,000 of us leaving the park, no kidding. And none of the characters were coming with us. And I had this Toy Story moment. You know when Andy's door shuts and all the toys come alive? I just suddenly realized that all the characters in Disney World were still behind us and in there somewhere. And I thought, what do they do until 9 o'clock the next morning when the park opens again? And I just envisioned them locked in this age-old battle with the villains of the park for control of the park. And I thought, that's its own story. And that became the Kingdom Keepers. 5 kids trying to keep the good in the park because the villains are trying to defeat the good characters. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ben, and I'm a 7th grader.
Hey, Ben.
I'm asking this question for Brittany from St. Paul's Lutheran School in Orange, California. Do you do anything different between writing books in adults and writing books for children? Is the process the same?
The process is the same. It sounds weird, but if I tried to write down to kids, you guys are way smarter than anybody gives you credit for. I have 2 kids. I mean, I know this. So there's just no way I can do that. If there's one difference between my adult novels and my younger reader novels, which are read by a lot of adults, by the way, it's probably the way they would be rated. My adult novels are more R-rated. There's more violence and stuff in them. My younger reader novels are more like PG-13 or something. But they have to have compelling characters. They have to have an exciting beginning, middle, and end, or you guys are going to toss it across the room, and that's what I don't want you to do.
We're going to go to Washington Middle School again, because
of course we are.
This question is going to come from Alyssa. Alyssa, take it away.
Hi, I'm a 7th grader at Washington Middle School, and I was wondering, how does the editing stage work?
How does the editing stage work? That's a good question. What you have to learn to do, I touched on this briefly before, what you have to learn to do is not be personal about your writing. You have to get yourself out of it and read your own writing in an objective way. Read your own writing like you're your teacher or your parent or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and you're sensitive about it, and you read it and think, oh, that's awful. What you want to do usually is take your writing, this is very embarrassing, so you need to shut the door, but you take your writing, you shut the door, and you read it aloud, and you will be shocked at how it sounds. It sounds completely different than it does when you're writing it on paper. I'm volunteer teaching at the Principia School right now in St. Louis, and one of the students turned in a piece of writing, and he had a 75-word sentence. And I said, dude, you need that to be like 8. It can be 8 sentences of 8 words, but it can't be 75 words. You'll hear what sounds right and what doesn't sound right. So for editing, you've just got to get out of yourself and hear it objectively.
What advice would you give to someone who had an interest in becoming an author?
Yeah, that's a good one. Even if you don't have an interest in becoming an author, if you just want to be a writer or write in a journal or whatever, there are 3 huge things you have to do. Read, read, and read. I read a ton. I'm a very slow reader, but I'm still a professional author. But you just have to read all the time, because that's where this idea of how to put words on paper comes from. You can't just make it up. You have to see how other people do it. I'm a gourmet reader. I read a paragraph and go, oh my gosh, how did that guy do it? And then I break it down and look at where the commas are. I go completely over the top. I'm bonkers about it, because I want to figure out how can we all basically use the same words. So how can that read so well? And I study it and try to figure out how that person is doing it. The other thing you can do is take a certain part of the day. You take 8 o'clock at night until 8:30. You take 7 o'clock in the morning until 7:30, and you sit down and that's all you do. You write for that 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you decide. I mean, I sit down and I write for 4 hours. I take about a 30-minute break and I write another 3 to 4 hours. I do this every day. I was writing until 9 o'clock at night last night because I knew I'd be here today. But you designate a period of time, you sit down, you don't do tweeting, you don't text, you don't do anything but write, and then put it away and move on and have fun and do that. But don't make up excuses not to be there. So you read, 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 and you designate a piece of time and you focus and you write.
Thanks, Maggie, for the question, Mr. Pearson for the answer. And Maggie, are you the Maggie whose work he read today? Yes. Congratulations.
Maggie!
Well done, Maggie. And Who's Charlie? Was it the Charlie asked a question or is it a different Charlie? It's this Charlie. Well, Charlie, thanks
All right,
very
Charlie.
much. Well done.
Well done.
We've got just a couple of minutes left. Would you like to take a question from this group here?
Sure.
Who has a question for Mr. Pearson about the writing process we talked about today that you might want to ask? And
Problems at home you want to share with the family? That's what Dave always says.
something about the writing process or book work
he had
or
one.
whatever the case would be. You got to wait. Let me get to you.
You're
What's your name,
live
young
on
man?
HGC-TV.
I'm Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Did you actually want to be a famous author, or did it
That-
kind of just happen?
That's a great question. Did I want to be a writer? I'm certainly not a famous author, but I had no idea that this was, if you had asked me when I was in high school what I was going to do, I was going to be a marine biologist. That was my interest. Math and science was my whole interest. And somewhere along the way, I could never stop telling stories. So even when I was doing math and science, even when I was always writing stories, making up stuff. I was very active imagination. I'd play out in the woods and make up whole worlds out there. So it was just something that crept up on me. And even through my music career, I was writing books by day. I wrote 11 screenplays that never sold. I wrote 3 books, multiple drafts of 3 books that never sold. And then one day, one of them sold. And, you know, I got paid about enough money to buy a microwave oven. I mean, I got nothing. And the next book, nothing. And the third book, nothing. And the 4th book I wrote became a national bestseller. It was just pure luck. It just was the right book at the right time. And now I've been writing bestsellers for I've written 43 books, so another 40 books. So, you know, and it's the greatest life there is, but it's something you really need another life to keep bread on the table. And then if you're lucky, the luck happens and you can eventually phase that out. I mean, I've been a bartender, I fixed brakes on cars, I used to mow lawns when I was a kid. I've done everything there is. And then one day I could keep myself alive writing. But it wasn't ever something where I said, I'm going to be a big famous author. It's just something that is in you, and you already know if you're a writer. You have this urge to just do it all the time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pearson. Thanks, St. Joan of Arc. Thanks, St. James the Greater, and everybody joining us today. Bye, everybody, from HGC TV Live.